We are live with expert paralegal Kelly Hawkes. I would call you an expert. You might not, but you might. I'm going to call you the expert. I'm asking you today, what can you evict a tenant for? What are all the possible reasons? Let's just maybe go through it step by step.
Sure. Yeah. So oftentimes landlords find themselves in a situation where they're not really sure what to do about what's happening at their property. This can include non-payment of rent. It can include issues between other tenants or even between the relationship of the landlord and the tenant, damages in the property, illegal activity, safety issues.
What would be considered illegal activity?
There's lots of different things that fall under that category. Specifically, if a landlord has evidence that maybe there's some illegal activity going on out of the property where they're using it as a location to do these illegal activities. Sometimes it's distributing drugs.
Yeah,
sometimes it's weapons. Sometimes it's things like that, right?
Okay.
There's a lot that falls under that category. It could also be acting contrary to bylaws or things like that. So it depends. When you come across a situation where you think something illegal is going on, it's really wise to get legal advice about it, because it could be something that going forward at the board, they might not consider it illegal activity. It has to be happening in the unit or on the residential complex. Sometimes it's assault too, where there's conflicts between parties and it happens in the complex. That would also be considered illegal activity.
Okay. And now what about tenants disturbing neighbors, like let's say a next door neighbor?
Unfortunately, the Landlord Tenant Board's jurisdiction, that's their area that they can cover, doesn't extend to neighbors.
Okay.
That's something that the landlord would have to deal with directly with the tenant, and it would have to be a police matter.
Okay. What about smoking?
Smoking. So it's kind of funny because the terms of the Residential Tenancies Act are very clouded when it comes to smoking.
Pun
right?
intended?
Yeah, right? And so if it's in your lease agreement that the tenant can't smoke in the property, then they can't smoke in the property. If they are, that would be one of the behavioral notices, which is an N5 notice.
Okay.
And that would give them an opportunity to rectify smoking in the unit. And if they didn't, then that would be grounds for termination. You could proceed with an application.
Okay, so everyone, when they sign a lease, they should probably just put no smoking inside the unit.
They
Always.
should, yeah.
Like that's the standard?
They should, yeah.
Okay. Pets?
Pets are allowed. You're allowed to have pets in a unit. It is a human right. The only time that you can seek termination of a tenancy for a pet is if they've caused damage to the property or they're causing a disturbance to other tenants, say it's a multi-unit property, or it's really the behavior of the owner that you're addressing. Well, actually, not that you're addressing, that you're going after. And if the owner is able to change all of those things that are happening with the pet, then they would be able to keep them. But if not, then again, that's an N5 issue.
Okay, so just damages. And then what constitutes damages to the property? Anything
that's negligent or willful. I know it's a broad category.
Okay.
But it really depends. Like there's a standard of reasonable wear and tear where it's really broadly discretionary based on how the adjudicator sees it, or when someone brings a file to me, when I look at it, things like tiny holes in the walls for hanging up pictures or things like that, that's not considered negligent or willful. That's just a regular wear and tear thing.
And tenants are allowed to hang up, you put holes in the wall, hang up mirrors, paintings.
Well, I mean, I have seen some lease agreements where the landlords aren't allowing it, but I do not believe that if they had proceeded to an application to try to recover money for that minimal type of damage, I don't believe they would be successful. Because it's in the manner of living, and it's reasonable enjoyment of the property, which they're entitled to.
Okay. My tenants have like scraped up the basement staircase walls from moving stuff up and down into the basement. Would that count?
That's negligent.
That's negligence.
Yeah. Okay. So what you would do is you would need to get a quote for the damages, and then that's an N5 issue. And the value of the damage, you could put it on the N5 notice, and that would be part of their remedy to have to fix it or pay.
Okay. What about like scraping up floors from moving stuff? Would that?
Again, yeah, that's not
Negligence.
normal. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, say you're living in the unit and the carpet gets worn, but it's a normal wear, then that's just what happens. It's the cost of doing business. It's the cost of being a landlord, right? But things that are outside of that are things that, like that you've pointed out to me right now.
Okay. One last one.
Yeah.
Carpet stains.
Yeah. Again, that's a tough one, and it depends on if they're excessive or not,
Okay.
right?
Like one massive, giant, like grape drink spill.
Grape drink spill.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
Have
think
they
worst case
tried to
scenarios
fix
here.
it? Like, have they tried to
Yeah, got it.
get a cleaner?
So just have a
Yes.
reasonable kind of.
At the end of the day, you would probably, after efforts to see if it can be fixed or cleaned,
Yeah.
you would probably be successful on an award for whatever the cost of
If
that
it's still
is.
damaged after those efforts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's accidental, but it's still not in the same condition it was when they moved in.
Okay. And then consistent late rent.
Yeah,
I know
that's a big
thing
one.
too, right?
It is. And a lot of people don't really think about that. Like, they kind of accept begrudgingly that their tenant is paying late on a regular basis, but it is a right of the landlord to receive their rent in full and on time. And if the tenant is not doing that, excuse me, you can look to the N8 notice, because that is the one that addresses persistent late payment. I have some people coming to me that have their tenant paid 3 months late in a row. That's not enough to consider, for the board to consider it persistent. I would start somewhere looking at 5 to 6, and then I would be looking at serving that notice.
Okay. What if in a 12-month lease agreement there was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 sporadic months, just random
That's
months where
enough.
they were late? That's enough.
Yeah,
But maybe 3 or 4 is not enough.
no, they would not consider that a persistent pattern.
Okay. And then that one just has to be filed at the end of the lease agreement, right?
Yeah, so that one has a 60-day termination notice, and it can't be served during a fixed term. It has to be served right before the end of a fixed term.
Okay. So if your lease is month to month, or
can
your
serve it
lease is coming
anytime.
up at the end of the 12 months,
Yeah.
then you can serve that N8 for consistent late rent.
Yeah, and what everybody needs to understand is just because they serve the notice doesn't automatically mean the tenant is going to vacate. Because I've told, I try to spread this as far as I can, is that there's really only 3 foundational ways that a tenancy can end in Ontario. The first one is if the tenant gives notice. The second one is if the parties agree the tenancy is ending. And the third one is if the board issues an order. So serving notices falls under that third one most often, because tenants don't just vacate when they receive a notice. There are a small percentage of them that do. They just want to move on. But for the most part, you do have to proceed to a hearing.
Okay. And then last one I think I have for you is just general uncleanliness.
Yeah, so that is an issue, because it can cause pests, especially if it includes a lot of excess garbage or things outside the property that would maybe attract some pests that weren't there before. So you certainly can address that. Again, that's the N5 notice. That N5 notice is it covers a lot of different behaviors, and that's one of them that would be included in that.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that we're missing here? There's non-payment of rent, consistent late rent.
Oh, there's so many reasons you can look to terminate a tenancy, but we could talk for so long about it. Let me think. If people have already gone to the Landlord Tenant Board website, and if they haven't, they should, just so that they know what's happening. Even if they don't intend to move forward on their own, at least they have a general idea of what their rights are and what notices they could use. So it's all of the N notices that are available. There's the big main ones that I see all the time are the N4, the N5, the N6, and the N7. Those are the big ones.
Okay. N4 is non-payment of rent.
Yeah.
N5 are these behavioral issues.
N6 is the illegal, and N7 is for causing serious problems.
What's a serious problem?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that. This can cover, like, these notices, I wish they were a little bit more specific to situations.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're looking at a situation, you're like, well, this actually is an N5 and an N7, or is it an N5, N6, and N7? Oftentimes people use the N7 when it comes to things like safety concerns. So for example, if someone has removed smoke alarms, that's a combo because it's illegal to remove smoke alarms. So you're doing an N6 and you're doing an N7, right? So yeah, there's all sorts of different things that can fall under that one, but it really is situational. It's dependent on the situation.
Okay, but typically maybe if there's something that's just off, your tenant's not taking care of the property, they're not paying you
It's
rent.
usually an N5
It's
or an N4.
Yeah, but there's usually a reason there that you might be able to pursue with the Landlord Tenant Board.
Yeah.
If it's kind of out of order in some way.
Yeah, and since you mentioned about the non-payment of rent, I think I should just make sure that everybody understands that since COVID happened, they added a new section of the Act. It's called 83.6. And at a hearing for rent arrears, the board will ask the landlord what efforts they made to try to reach some kind of repayment agreement with the tenant, because this has never happened before. It's unprecedented, right? There are so many people who did want to pay their rent, but they simply couldn't because they weren't able to work.
Yeah.
And then the catch-up for them is so long. What you'll get at a hearing, if that person is willing and can and has the means to pay, is something called a conditional order, where the monthly rent would have to be paid in full and on time, and then they're able to make payments on a regular basis.
Like installment payments?
Yeah, to try to get those arrears down.
Okay.
And then to balance the rights of the landlord, that order that you would get from the board, that conditional order, would have a clause in it called a Section 78, which means if the tenant defaults on any of the terms that are in that order, then the landlord could get termination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a good high-level thing. I know there's so much more
Yeah, there is.
to go through, but we don't have to kind of do that. It's just a high-level thing. What can you evict a tenant for?
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.